And now, a story from the Appleseed.
I was on the road for 2 weeks and I was tired, but I was also getting excited because the next portion of my leg of work, the third week, the final week, took place in Virginia Beach. And I have friends that live there and they are amazing, amazing cooks. I love their company. They want me to tell and sing stories. She'll tell some stories. We sit around until it's late. It's just wonderful. And so I was so stoked. I was coming in on a Friday. They had to work, but they're like, look, you have the house. I actually came in on Thursday night. I had off Friday, and then Saturday we were going to hang out. And they said, look, come on in. We'll have a great meal, but we have to work Friday. You can have the house to yourself or do whatever you want. And I said, well, I know what I want to do. I want to go down to that strip of the beach where you showed me, and it was off season, my favorite kind of the time of the year when it's just like warm in the sun but chilly down at the beach. I love that. And I said, that's where I want to go. I want to go with a book, enjoy myself, have some silence. I said, I've had quite a 2 weeks of work. They said, not a problem. Well, I landed at their house and we had a lovely meal and talked until late in the night, went to bed. And when I woke up, they were already gone. But on the kitchen counter was a shopping bag, a reusable shopping bag. And in it was grapes and water and sun lotion, because she knows me. I have 2 colors, chalk and tomato. That's it. Unlike, I envy, and yet I don't envy the women that tan because they look like old leather belts later in life. So I'm kind of okay with this. So I prepared myself for the beach. And because I burn, it is quite the undertaking to prepare. I slather myself like you're putting butter on a turkey at Thanksgiving. I mean, all over every nook and cranny. I had my muumuu and bathing suit cover up because I had already been kind of enjoying myself on my trip. And I love my, it is like the sail of a ship. It's just wonderful. It billows all around me. And I have a hat. I take it everywhere with me. I love my hat. My husband hates it. It is huge. It's like a flour tortilla meant a UFO. I mean, it's gigantic. It casts a huge shadow around me. I am fully protected. I threw my book in that I had brought, and they had leaned a chair against the cupboard. I grabbed that and I put the bag on my shoulder, dropped my phone in it and a few other little odds and ends. And I went out to my car. Threw the chair into the back, threw the bag on the passenger seat, and I got in and off I went. I was so pumped. As I drove, I cracked the window and I could smell that salty air. I just loved that smell. And as I pulled into this parking lot that's right on the strip of that beach, it was exactly as I expected. It was desolate. Nobody's there. Even during the busiest times, hardly anyone's there. It's a condo area of people that work in the area. And so you don't have visitors down that way very much. And as I pulled into the parking lot, I noticed there was only one other car. And I slid in 2 parking spaces over from it. It was actually a truck. And I put the window down and listened to the comings and the goings of the tide, the heartbeat of the earth, and just relaxed into it. I took the keys and dropped them in my lap, and I turned to put them in my bag, and that is when I looked into the truck. And I took a good look at the truck. The wheel wells were eaten through with holes, ragged holes, from the salt, the salty air and the saltiness of that area. There was an unplanned 2-tone paint job, and in the back, I saw the handles of like shovels and just some odd things back there. And in the passenger seat was a man. And he was sitting in the seat like a statue, staring straight ahead over the steering wheel, leaning forward a little bit. And he was it was palpable what I felt coming off of him. I knew I just felt a connection. I knew he was not in a good place and not a happy guy. And I sat there and I thought, okay, you have planned this on this whole trip, that you were going to have this day to do what you wanted, to read your book, to sit on the beach and enjoy yourself. But now you're here alone, and there's a guy in a truck over there who is definitely not happy. And I'm pretty sure just by the shows I've watched that is a pickaxe and a shovel back there. And there's probably duct tape and garbage bags. What am I going to do? This is the beginning of like one of those Dateline shows. But you know what? I deserved that break. I deserved that time. I had completely prepared for it. And I thought, you know what? I know what I'm going to do. So I got the bag and I got the chair out of the back. I locked the car and I got my phone out and I thought, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to call my voicemail. That way it'll ping all the cell towers. So if they have to try and find my body, they know about where it's at. And I'm going to walk holding the chair, trying to have the bag on the crook of my arm, talking on the phone, very animated, and look at my watch and talk, so that he'll see, oh, she's talking to someone. She's meeting someone here. Someone knows where she's at. And he'll think twice before he does anything, right? And as I was walking away and getting ready to dial my phone number so I could listen to my own self-talk, I heard a voice. It's so interesting to me. That voice that resides in all of us, and we know it's not ours. And it was so clear and it cut through all of my anxiety, all of my nervousness, through the beating of my heart. And I heard it as if it was spoken right here by somebody, almost as if the hair by my ear moved. I heard, talk to him. I didn't. Are you crazy? I'm not going to talk to him. I've got a plan. He's crazy. I know that he wants to harm me. I've built this whole crime show in my head by this point. And so I kept walking and I called myself and I started talking into my phone. And I was waving my arms and talking and holding the chair up and looking at my watch. And then I'm thinking, I'm not there to talk to him. I'm there to talk to myself and leave a message because I deserve this time on the beach. And I walked down the dock that went to the beach, put the phone away, didn't hear any footsteps running up behind me. And I thought, I'm going to live, walked onto the sand and then through the sand. You know, I think walking in sand lets your feet know how your teeth feel when they get Novocaine. So I walked through the sand, found a place that was really good because the tide had come up just enough and I went back far enough that I knew I had some times till it was just touching my toes. I opened up the chair, I sat down, put my bags beside me and leaned back. Don't you know how it is when you stand under a sugared sky at night or at the base of a beautiful mountain or in front of a vast sea, we all wax philosophical. So there I sat, having all kinds of philosophical, deep thoughts while looking over my shoulder to make sure he was not coming after me. Finally, I realized he wasn't coming. I was safe. And so I reached in and I got some grapes, popped them in my mouth, took a sip of water, and I got my book. I was ready to relax. I took it and I opened it till the spine cracked so it would lay flat and 100 dead librarians rolled over in their grave. As I began to read, it happened again, clear as a bell. I can sit here in front of you with all sincerity and say I can still hear the tone of that voice. Talk to him. And I was like, no, I'm not doing it. This is crazy. And I looked at my book and I began to read. You know when you're tired and you're trying to read and you read a paragraph and then you have to stop and go, I don't even know what I just read. And you have to go back to the top. I kept doing that over and over and I finally slammed it shut and I was like, doggone it. And I dropped the book in the bag and I thought, well, this is no fun because now it's in my head. So I'll make a deal because isn't that what we do? I said, here's the deal. If he's there when I leave, if he's still in the truck, I'll talk to him. And so I leaned back and I thought, well, at least I can get some relaxation for a while. And the water was just starting to kiss my toes and I was enjoying it. And over the sound of the seagulls, I heard the voice again. Talk to him. Okay. I closed my chair and almost in a small tantrum, throwing the bag onto my shoulder, I turned to head back and he was there. He was standing at the end of the dock, right where I had just stepped off maybe 20 minutes ago. And his legs were spread and he was planted and his hands were in the pockets of his sweatshirt and he was just staring out at the ocean. And I was like, well, don't you have a sense of humor? And so I trudged over to the dock and I stood there, and he was really tall. And I was already down a foot because of the dock, an extra foot. And I looked up and I said, "Hey, how are you?" And without looking at me, he said, "I'm fine, ma'am." Okay. Well, I did it. I talked to him. But I knew I should say a little more. And I said, "No, really, how are you?" And he said, "I said I'm fine, ma'am." I was like, okay. I did what I was supposed to do. I'm finished. I walked down the side of that little dock, hoisted myself onto it, and I began to walk when I heard the voice again, clear as a bell. "It will pass." I didn't even have to think about what I was supposed to do. It was already there. It's almost like the voice carried with it silent directions that I didn't even have to think about. And I turned around and I said, "Hey." He turned around at me, kind of arched, his head tilted, his eyebrow furrowed with from the interruption. And I said, "It'll pass." And he said, "Excuse me, what?" I said, "It'll pass. Whatever you're dealing with right now, it is temporary and it will pass." I just feel like I'm supposed to tell you that. It'll pass. And he just stared at me. So I turned around, holding the chair and the bag, and I walked to my car. I reached in my bag, pulled out the keys, unlocked the car, threw the chair in the back, opened the front door, threw the bag on the passenger seat, got in, shut the door, locked it. I could hear the rushing, not of the ocean, but of my heart in my ears. Talking to strangers when you're scared and walking through sand can be quite the workout. I looked up and I could see him at the end of the dock, like a small dot amongst the dry beach grass. I put the key in the car and turned it and thought, well, I guess that's it. And I didn't hear a voice this time, but I knew I was supposed to do more. So I got in my bag, I got out my wallet, I got out a card, and I thought, oh, you are opening a door? I mean, what are you doing? But I knew I was supposed to do it, and I tucked it right in between the rubber and the window of his truck. And I got in the car, and a peace settled over me, just like whew, more peace than I could have ever received by sitting on that beach enjoying myself. I went back to April and David's, went into the backyard, set up the chair, and I read, and I drank my water, and I ate my grapes. And when they came home, I told them what happened. They're like, wow, that's weird. And I'm like, it is what it is. It was strange. But I'm happy I'm here and alive to tell the story. Well, I went home then, and 3 weeks later, my phone rang, and it was a Virginia Beach number. And I knew it was probably him. And as I held my phone in my hand, I looked at it and thought, open the door or keep it closed, because I just didn't know what I was getting into. And I swiped and I said, hello? And he said, yes, ma'am. Is this the woman that talked to me at the beach? And I said, yes. And he said, oh, good. He said, I wanted to call you and tell you what was happening. I said, okay. And he said, so your name's Kim, and I know that. He said, but my name is Quest. And I said, seriously? He said, yes. I'm like, well, that fits this just perfectly. And he said, they call me Quest. And he said, here's what happened. He said, I woke up that morning, and he said, I'm married. He said, I've been married for 7 years, and we had a new baby boy recently. He's beautiful. Everything I do is for my family. He said, I actually own a boat detailing company. I detail boats all around Virginia Beach. He said, thus the truck. And he said, but that morning, my wife told me that little boy probably wasn't mine. He said, my whole world disappeared. And it probably belongs to my best friend. He said, that little boy, I love him so much, and he's probably not mine. He said, that's what happened that morning. And he said, when I was sitting in the truck, I kept saying, how do I do it? Do I just walk in? Are my boots heavy enough? Do I just go in without my boots and swim until I cramp up and just, how do you do this? I'd never thought about it before. And he said, as I sat in that truck, I said to myself, if you want me to live, you need to tell me. And I didn't hear one thing. And he said, I knew sooner or later you'd be leaving the beach, so I went out to the edge of the dock, and I decided I'd stand there and wait. And then when you were walking down the dock, you said, it'll pass. I said, I remember. And he said, I stood there thinking, how does she know? Because you said it's temporary. It'll pass. It'll pass. And he said, how did you know? I said, I didn't know. I said, I kept hearing that I was supposed to talk to you. And that's the words that I was given. He said, well, you left. And he said, I watched you leave the whole way. And I kept watching the parking lot, just computing what had just happened. And so I went back to my truck. I went to my pastor's where I'd not been in years, and I cried until I threw up. And he talked me through it. And I'm getting a DNA test on that boy, and if he's mine, I'm getting him. And I said, well, I'm really proud of you. I'm happy to hear from you. And he said, I would love to meet you. I said, I would be fine with that. I said, as a matter of fact, and I told him the dates I was actually going to be back in Virginia Beach. I said, my daughter's coming with me. She's traveling with me. And so I would love to meet you. And he said, great. So we planned to meet at a coffee shop. We picked the coffee shop. And my daughter and I arrived early so we could kind of get our seats and feel it out. And he walked. That door flew open. He scanned that place and he threw his arms wide and he goes, there she is, my angel. He walked over. I stood up. He gave me a huge hug, pumped my daughter's hand, said it was so good to see me, and sat down. And I said, look, I am so happy to see you. I'm so thrilled. And I said, but I need to tell you something. I'm not an angel. I said, please don't call me that. And he said, why? I said, buddy, I am just a reluctant human. I did not want to talk to you. I said, it was 4 or 5 times that I was told to talk to you. And I said, no, I deserved that time. I deserved that break. I had my plan. I knew what I wanted to do. You were an inconvenience. I said, I am not an angel. And I said, I have to tell you something. I was really scared of you and I'm sorry. I said, it just didn't look like a good situation going on with you. And I was scared of you and I apologize. He reached across the table and took my hand and he said, it's okay. He said, I was scared of you too. I said, what? And he said, have you seen yourself in that hat? Okay. Lost keys, spilled coffee. Traffic's backed up on the highway. The phone won't stop ringing. It's just another day. The best laid plans are just a misfire. Tiptoeing on a tight wire. It's a heavy price to pay for just another day. Gotta get my feet back where they belong. Find that note that is my favorite song. Point my feet the right way and live and live. Another day. A little song for Quest.
Thanks for joining us for a story from the Appleseed.